topic.
Eintlik 'n maklike ding, ja. Right, is ons op tyd? Ja,
Kan ek
ons
net
kan
gou
begin.
iets sê voor julle begin?
Ja,
Vir julle wat dit actually gebruik, ons het van die mock exams begin laai op daai aanlyn ding. Sover nog net die procedures en general stuff. Ek gaan môre met die technical begin. So daar's lekker mock exams om te kyk of jy kan staan of nie. Okay, amen.
Baie dankie.
right. So chapter 29, measurements. Let me just see here. Okay. Wow.
En dan net sê.
Yeah, I'm presenting class and I'm dead quiet. Okay, let's try again. Don't know how it happened, but it did. Right. That last guy, is he in? Okay, right. So we take measurements, and in order to take measurements, we need a couple of different instruments. Just one moment. I've got, what's he? Share my screen.
Ons kan jou skerm sien.
Kan jy die handboek
Ons sien die handboek, ja.
Okay.
Het jy opgehou, share?
Ja.
Sien jy hom nou? Okay, right there. Technical issue number 2 has been sorted out. Right. First is the ammeter or the amp meter, and that is self-explanatory. It explains itself. It measures amps, and it basically consists of a coil that's next to a magnet, and we know that if there's a current flowing through a coil, it generates a magnetic field. And this coil is on a pivot system, so the moment it generates a magnetic field, it opposes the other one and it moves. It either attracts or opposes, and then it moves. That causes the meter to display a certain value. Now, they calibrate the meter so that it will display, in most cases, milliamps or microamps, depends on the meter. And then we will either put a series resistor with that to measure voltage, or a parallel resistor with a meter to measure current. Now, an ammeter always connects in series. Now, this is specifically in DC. Times have moved on. I mean, we've got clamp meters, which works on a transformer basis, where you use it on AC current. So this is the series. Excuse toch?
Excuse, ek moet net mute, excuse.
Sure. Okay, 100%. So the clamp meter is used for AC. Now, the meters they talk in the book about are very old technology, like the in-series amp meter, although we do use them still in DC circuits. Technology has moved on. And for instance, I don't know how many people are familiar with Arduino, but you do get sensors that can measure bidirectional current flow that's also connected in series, but far superior to the old-fashioned coil meter. But for the purposes of tonight's class, we're going to look at the old technology that is here and there still in use. Like I said, the range of an ammeter, in most cases, they have got a very low amperage that they can measure milliamps or microamps in some cases. And then you put a shunt resistor in parallel with the ammeter. And that will increase the value. And there's a calculation where you can calculate the value of your shunt resistor, and they've got it nicely displayed over here. What they don't tell you, or not explicitly, is that the N in the formula is your scale factor or your multiplier. So in order to determine N, I must just go to another screen quickly because I actually did some research while preparing. Let's just go to my favorite. Right, over here, they show you that it is the current that you want to measure divided by, or no, the current value of your meter, in other words, current measured divided by the total current you want to measure. And that gives you that a scale factor or multiplier, as they call it. Now, in order to calculate your shunt resistor, you'd use that formula that they've got there. And they've got an example there for us. 100 ohms divided by 1,000 minus the 1. Now, the 1 they get from that 1 milliamp. And there you can see the formula that they use the scale factor. Chances that you are actually going to do this ever is very slim because technology has progressed. And in most cases, everything is electronic. So you'll see later on when we get to electronic instruments that their impedance are extremely high. And obviously, when you measure stuff, you don't want your instrument to influence the measurement. So you want the impedance or the resistance to be as high as possible to have the least effect on your measurement. You don't want your instrument to influence your measurement. And this shunt resistor is for amp meters, and that goes in series with in parallel with the meter. So we know that in Ohm's law we said that the current splits. So if you put a low value resistor in parallel with the amp meter, the current will split, and the lower resistor will take the most current, and that gives you the ability to measure high currents with a small meter. And then they say here, amp meters designed for small currents are generally called milliamp meters or microamp meters. But either which one you can use, and you will just choose or calculate the correct shunt value. So whether it's a milliamp meter or a microamp meter, if you do your calculation for your shunt resistor, you will be able to use it as a 5 amp, 10 amp, or 30 amp meter, obviously you will just have to print a piece of paper to put inside the meter for the calibration, because otherwise it's still going to show you milliamps, and you'll have to make a little do a calculation in order to determine what the actual value is. Then we move on to voltmeters. Just before we carry on, is there any questions about the amp meter or the ammeter? Silence is good. Right, the voltmeter is used to measure voltage. Now, as I explained right at the beginning, that the milliamp meter, in order to get the needle to move, you need a magnetic field. In order to get a magnetic field, you need current. So in actual fact, the voltmeter is also an ammeter, but can be converted into a voltmeter by adding a suitable multiplier resistor in series with the milliamp meter or whatever microamp meter, whatever you have. So we must remember that amp is parallel and volt is series. And then once again, they've got a calculation there that they give us to calculate your value for your ohm or your series resistor.
Henry, are they going to
Yes.
ask us questions on these old things?
Yes, they can. It is in the book, and they can ask you anything that is in the book. And I don't want to take a chance and say they won't. I I don't see the purpose, but I don't want to say that, because they gave us the book and said, learn the book, and we've got to tell you what's in the book. And they can ask anything that's in the book. So, but it's good to know it's like a guy that works with a computer. If you work with a computer from the days of DOS, with a console where you've got to physically type instructions, and you work on a Windows computer and things go wrong, chances of for you to sort things out or get it going is far better than a guy that has never seen a console in his life. I spoke to some people and I said to them, when you want to install something on Linux, you just go onto the command line and you type in the whatever you want to install, short commands. And they straight out tell me, listen, sorry, I don't do console. If I can't click, I don't use it. So, yeah, it's good to know where it comes from, but not, you've got to know it for the exam, but you can forget it afterwards, basically. Right, now this is where it becomes a bit confusing. When you measure voltage, you connect your voltage in parallel with a circuit. So the resistor goes in series, but the meter goes in parallel. So in other words, the resistor forms part of your meter, and that becomes the whole meter, and you connect that to the circuit in parallel. So in other words, if you would measure a battery, you'll put the positive terminal or positive probe on the positive side of the battery and the negative probe on the negative side of the battery, and then you measure voltage. Now, if you do that, when you measure amps, the smoke's going to escape from the meter. So your meter, you always put in series to measure amp, and you measure voltage in parallel. And it's difficult to explain it without demonstrating it. But when we are together, I'll bring a multimeter with for practical or whatever, and just show you so that you understand when are you measuring voltage and when are you measuring amps. Here they say that for it to have the least effect on the circuit, the resistance of a voltmeter should be as high as possible. So the impedance must be as high as possible, because you don't want to try and measure your USB port at 5 volts, but your amp meter is like drops at 2 or 3 volts before it starts measuring. And then you measure your USB port at 3 volts. You think that the voltage is too low, you increase the voltage, and suddenly everything that you plug into your USB port starts to smoke. So that's why your meter should be, the impedance or the resistance of the voltmeter should be as high as possible. Now, with the new transistorized voltmeters, I don't think you can actually, I will actually try and measure one and see, but I don't think you will actually measure anything. It will be in the region of mega ohms. Here they say moving coil meters are usually designed to measure DC circuits. That is true. You can also do AC circuits with that, but you need a rectifying circuit, and you know that a rectifier gives you direct current out, but then you only get an average of the voltage that comes out of the rectifier, and not a true RMS. No. Now, when you look at multimeters, you will see that when you go up in price, they will usually have written on it true RMS, which makes it a better meter. So that's a way of remembering that when it goes through the rectifier, it's not, it's an average value of the rectified AC waveform. True RMS only works if it's a pure sine wave. If it's any other waveform, RMS does not apply anymore, because it's logical. The math doesn't work anymore. So obviously, if the waveform changes, the calculation will change with it, and RMS is a fixed calculation, as we've done with AC circuits, I think it was. Then we look at the multimeter. Multimeter, some people call it the AVO. I don't know whether you ever heard that. I don't know where that abbreviation comes from. Amp, voltage, and I don't know what that is. Ohms, probably. You get moving coil. I have one here still, but there's specific applications where a digital multimeter doesn't work. Say, for argument's sake, you don't have an oscilloscope and you need to measure something that sends a pulse out every now and then. Now, a analog meter, I mean a digital meter, or yeah, let's call it a digital meter, measures every few seconds, takes a sample, and then converts it to the display. Some of them would do 20 conversions a second. Some of them would do 100 conversions a second. And that you will also look in the specifications. When you buy a multimeter, you would try and get the one with the highest sample rate, would be more accurate. But if you've got a pulse of a couple of milliseconds, it's going to miss it. And that's where the analog meter come in. You might not see the exact voltage of the spike, but you'll be able to see that there's something happening because the needle is moving. So there is still specific applications. If you don't have an oscilloscope, you can use an analog meter to measure or to see the pulse if it's too fast, for the analog meter to see. So in some cases, you might measure a 0 voltage with the analog meter, with the digital meter. But if you put the analog meter on there, you'll see that it pulses, the needle is moving. So you know something's happening. But that's in exceptional circumstances. There's some multimeters, especially some of the newer ones, that will do capacitance. There's some that will actually do inductance as well. Capacitors are fairly common these days. Then, of course, they do the beta, the gain of a transistor, which is sometimes handy. And then, of course, the continuity meter, and that's also something that a person with a little bit of experience tend to know how to look for a meter that's got a very good continuity measurement. So if you take the two probes and you put it on continuity and you touch the two probes, the buzzer will go. But some meters only uses the buzzer as a closed circuit. So the moment you touch the probes, you close the circuit and the buzzer starts buzzing. But if you hit them quickly together, it's too fast for the buzzer and it does nothing. Now, some of your more sophisticated meters or multimeters, like the Fluke and so on, they've got a gate circuit with a Smith trigger. So the moment you touch the two together, it activates the circuit and it gives you a buzz. So you know something's happened. But I looked at the Fluke meters the other day and they're about 70,000 Rand for a meter. It's a lot of money. And a lot of people, when they see your Fluke meter, they would like to have it, and some of them might take it. Anyway, let's carry on swiftly. Okay, some of the meters you get, most analog meters, you have to select the scale. And if you select a scale that's too low, you're going to overdrive the meter and it can be damaged. Then you get the digital meter, where you've got to also select the scale, which can also get damaged if you use a scale too low. And then you get a meter, what they call auto ranging, which will then automatically up the display until it gets to the right resolution, so that it gives you a proper reading. Now, they've got the advantages. It's nice because you can be a monkey and just put the probes on the voltage. You don't need to know what you're going to measure. You just put it on the car battery and it will decide that, okay, it will, after a couple of milliseconds, display 12 volts. The pre-selected meter will display the voltage faster because it doesn't have to calibrate first. It can just display. So auto scale is nice. And most of your expensive meters are auto scale. And then, of course, the more you spend, the faster they react. And it's always nice to have nice tools. I'm running away now. I'm going faster than myself. Okay. Frequency counter. Now, for some reason, I don't actually see that in this section of the book. But I know I have read, and in the ICASA law, if we can call it that, it states there that every radio amateur must have a frequency counter to ensure that his equipment are performing within specification. In other words, that you're on the right frequency or whatever. Another guy was climbing up a mountain the other day, and he had a commercial radio with him, and he didn't know on which frequency he was, and a bunch of oaks jumped on top of him, or actually just one oak, and said, "But you're a radio amateur. You're supposed to have a frequency counter." Yes, you must have a frequency counter, but you don't necessarily have to carry it up the mountain with you. You can check your equipment at home and then know that it's right. And the poor oak was upset because this guy was giving him carrots there on the mountain. But anyway, problem sorted out, and he had a nice chat, and he eventually figured out what frequency he was on. Now, frequency counters these days, LC circuits or crystal circuits, I have never seen a oscillator, or I mean a frequency counter that still uses the old system of it's all crystal controlled. Inductor capacitor oscillators, I haven't seen one. They are all crystal controlled, and they are very accurate because of the crystal. And well, there's not much more that I can tell you about them. It's usually to measure the frequency of your radio to see whether it's on frequency, and you get fairly cheap ones. I've seen obviously all digital display. You get cheap frequency counters. I know, I can't get to the guy's name now, but one of our usual flea market guys sells them, but he wasn't there with the last flea market, but he's got a shop as well. So a person can get those frequency counters from him, and they work well. And then the other very important piece of equipment is a power and a SWR meter. Now, SWR stands for standing wave ratio. Now, the one side measures the power output of a transmitter, and the other side measures the reflected. And I think you guys did do SWR, so you know exactly what the meter does. But it's probably one of the most important, in my view, it's more important than the frequency counter, because if you don't have, if your SWR is far out on your antenna, you won't have a radio long enough to cause trouble to even worry about the frequency counter. So the power meter, you get an average and a peak meter. So you must know what type of meter you have, whether it's an average power or a peak power meter, because of whatever the human voice, when you speak, the amplitudes can go higher, and you might see the peaks higher on a peak meter than on an average meter, and it will differ between SSB, AM, and FM signals. Well, FM have a constant transmitter output because it's frequency modulation and not amplitude. Obviously, if the amplitude changes, the wattage will change, but the FM signal is frequency modulated, so the frequency change and the amplitude stays the same. Your power meters are sometimes called watt meters. Let me see here. What did I mark here? Okay, depending on the meter, it may measure average power or peak power. Just important thing to know. Okay, then there's another thing. SWR meters generally measure both forward and reflected power. and use a ratio between the forward and the reflected power to calculate the SWR value. Because they measure reflected power, they are sometimes called reflectometers. Now, it's the first time I hear that word, but I'm pretty sure they're going to ask you that. So, SWR, it is calculated between whatever the power is that you send out and the power that's reflected. And because it uses the reflected power to do the calculation, it's called a reflectometer or reflectometers if there's more than one. The term is not preferred. Okay, thank you very much. Now, some modern SWR meters is called antenna analyzers. Now, a good example of an antenna analyzer is a nano VNA, which is a very handy piece of equipment. Now, some people will ask, why must I have a nano VNA and an SWR meter? You see, the SWR meter is a instrument that you can connect permanently in your setup. And when you use your radio, the needles are dancing. And at a glance, you can see that everything is right. With an antenna analyzer, you would tune the antenna in before you actually connect it to a radio. Now, the guys that were there by the competition, the QRP competition, Ryan and Peter, and I don't know who else was there, they would remember that I think we've used two different types of analyzers. The one time we used the older one, and then we used the nano VNA as well to set up the antenna for the competition. We are very fortunate to live in the times that we do, because about 5 years back, if you wanted to buy a antenna analyzer, the cheapest ones were in the region between 9 and 10,000 rand. The nano VNA has come down to about 3,000 rand at the moment, and then you get a cheaper version, which I will not suggest you buy, for about 2,000 rand, but the bigger one is well worth it for an extra 1,000 rand. It's just a better instrument. And then the one where I saw the first antenna analyzer, I asked the guy how much it was. He said they gave it to him at cost because they brought it from overseas as a demo unit. He got it for 80,000. So just to give you an idea, but that's a real professional one. But yeah, that's what they used to cost 10, 15 years back. And then they explain to you that you can use the analyzer, because what it basically has or does is it sends a sweep. It sweeps from high to low or from low to high, whichever way you want. And it gives you, it measures the reflected signal, and it gives you a graph. And in that way, you can see exactly where your antenna's optimum performance is. And then if you need it to be, you want the antenna to resonate at a higher frequency, you need to make the antenna shorter, or vice versa. If you need it to resonate at a lower frequency, you've got to increase the length of the antenna. And in my opinion, any amateur that has a antenna analyzer has got an unfair advantage over all the others, because you can tune an antenna perfectly without How we used to do it in the olden days, you'd have a cross needle SWR meter, and you will put your radio on, key the radio, look at the SWR meter, run out to the antenna, change the length, and see what the result is. If you made the antenna longer and the SWR is higher, then you know that you're now in the wrong direction. So then you go the other way. And then, of course, you don't know. You might take off too much. And then to make a long story short, it was a lot of running up and down. So technology has really progressed a lot. The one disadvantage of these antenna analyzers is they are very sensitive to RF interference. So you cannot put your antenna on the tower there by Fort Klapperkop and then stand at the bottom and try and tune your antenna, because there is just too many signals there and it's going to interfere with the analyzer's readings and whatever. So that, as they say here, they tend to work badly in the presence of strong RF fields as they interpret these signals coming down the feed line as reflected power. So that can really confuse you. Same will happen if we would use the analyzer there by the Vernon's place, and we're trying to set up a competition antenna while Vernon is having a QSO in his shack. We will not get that antenna working. It's going to really mess us around. So that is where the cross needle high power SWR meter would measure far better. Okay, then we get to a very nice piece of equipment. And if you ever have the opportunity, and this is something I tell the Taki students very often, is if you have the opportunity to buy an oscilloscope, even if it's an old one, it's well worth it. Once you get used to this thing and they take it away from you, you're going to feel like a blind man. Just get to my page here with my crypt notes so that I can. Right now, I'm going to just sum up basically what happens in an oscilloscope. You can go and read this in detail. The cathode ray tube, CRT. Now that's the same thing that the old TVs used to use. They've got basically an X and a Y amplifier. Now, the X amplifier usually works on a time base, so it will scan from one side to the other, and the Y deflector plates or Y axis is very sensitive and it can move extremely fast. And that is, like I explained just now, if you don't have an oscilloscope, you would use the analog meter to look for pulses. But if you have a scope, it is hands down the best piece of equipment to have for pulses or frequencies, or we use it a lot to monitor data communication on data lines and clock signals and so on, because of its high speed that it displays. And then it basically gives you a graph on the screen over time so that you can see what happens. And then you get very sophisticated new oscilloscopes which gives you digital readouts and can actually record, and the functions are limitless on those things. But like I say, even the old ones are good. A good old scope is better than a new cheap scope. Scopes that don't work are these that you connect to the computer. the computer is too slow. It works. It's better than nothing, but it's not worth its money. So if you buy a scope, don't buy the cheapest there is. Rather buy a good second-hand one than to buy a cheap new one. They need to be of a certain standard if you buy a oscilloscope. Yeah, like they say, use microprocessors to digitize the incoming signal and then display the same information on the screen. Some of them can actually record, and when you've got to look at that screen, it has to have a very high resolution, because if the resolution's not high enough, then your display is not going to really make sense to you. It's going to give you the basics. You'll be able to see whether there's something happening or not. But yeah, you need to buy. Sometimes it's better to buy a quality second-hand one than to buy a cheap new one. And then here they explain that X gains time, what I basically said now. And then your screen is divided in blocks, and you get volts per division, and then of course nanoseconds per division, and you can set the time base faster and slower, and obviously the voltage that it can handle, like the multimeter. You can set the scale. The oscilloscope, you can also set the scale, but that would be, you know what, you can almost, the oscilloscope is a course on its own if you really want to know how it works. But you can buy one and you will pick up on the fly, so it's a bit intimidating right at the beginning, but you master it eventually. And same argument goes with oscilloscopes. It's like radios. I mean, if I take Vernon's radio, I'll have to read the manual because I don't know how it works. And so you got a basic idea what should happen, but you need the manual to get it to happen. And that goes with most radios. Nobody expects you to know how every radio operates. So with your practical exam as well, we will show you what is what, and you can tell me, listen here, I need to turn the power down before I switch on, and then I'll tell you, listen here, you turn the power down over here, because as long as you know what should happen. Right, the marker generator. Now this is something I've never seen. It's used to determine the frequency of a receiver before frequency count. I think that receiver should be transmitter before frequency counters were available. It consists of a crystal oscillator that has been designed to generate harmonics that serves as frequency markers throughout the HF spectrum. So a marker generator is a device that can generate multiple frequencies. That's the harmonics. Um, like I show there, 1 megahertz, 100 megahertz, or kilohertz, 10 kilohertz. And then something that you guys can remember is that harmonics are always a multiple of the fundamental frequency. So if we have 150 megahertz, 300 would be a harmonic. And then 3 times, so what is it, 450 would be another one. So just, I don't know whether they actually did it in the book, but it's just a good thing. It's always a multiple of the fundamental frequency. Okay, so it's multiple frequencies, and that marker frequency, I mean, we use frequency counters, so all you need to know is what they say there. We don't have to spend hours on this marker generator. The dip meter is used to measure resonant frequencies of a tuned circuit or antenna. Um, Now, it works on the same principle as these metal detectors. Metal detector has got two circuits that oscillate, and they resonate on the same frequency. One circuit is tuned with a capacitor circuit, and the other circuit has got that wound or wind at the foot piece. And so when the two circuits resonate at the same frequency, makes no sound because the one cancels the other one out. Moment you move a piece of metal into the one half of the circuit, into the coil that's in the foot piece, you change the frequency, and because they don't cancel each other out anymore, it starts to beep. Now, this dip meter works exactly the opposite way. So it makes a noise or gives a reading, and the moment it approaches the resonant frequency of the tuned circuit, it will show a dip, hence the name dip meter. And they call it also the grid dip oscillator, GDO. From the time that then vacuum tubes were used to observe the grid current during measurements. With vacuum tubes, that's really old history, but we need to know that it gives a dip when it is at the tuned circuit. So remember the metal detector, you're walking on the beach, dead quiet, you piece of metal in the sand, thing goes beep because it disturbs the tuned circuit. This is the other way around. The moment it gets close to the tuned circuit, the frequency gets close to the tuned circuit, it dips, and you know that that is the dip that you were looking for. Okay, that's that. Let's see what they say here. Dummy load. I think you guys know exactly what the dummy load is. What is important is that a dummy load consists of a non-inductive resistor. Now, those things are very scarce. And the normal resistors that I sell, and you get everywhere, especially high value ones that you would want to use in a dummy load, has got it's a coil, and it has inductance, and you're going to have a very hard time to build a dummy load out of that because you're going to be spot on 50 ohms. But if you put it on a SWR meter, your SWR is going to be way out, and everything else with it, all your readings, because you don't actually have a 50 ohm dummy load. You've got a oscillating circuit that reacts to the frequency you push into it. So that's an important thing to know, is that dummy loads are always made with non-inductive resistors. Anything that's got a coil is going to react to frequency. And if you don't expect that, it's going to mess you around big time. Here they say most high power resistors are wire wound. These have considerable inductance and are not suitable for RF use. And then you get dummy loads, you know, the big ones. Some of them has got fans. Some of them are in oil. I mean, I know that you get. It looks like it's a tin of paint. Yeah, it looks homemade, but they actually pay top dollar for those things. They're not homemade. They're very expensive and can handle very high power. Field strength meter. Now, this is basically the same as the tuner. It's got a diode detector and a sensitive microamp meter or ammeter. And it's used to measure the strength of a RF field. But they're not frequency selective, so you can't, it just shows you there's frequency, but you don't necessarily know what the frequency is, and it's approximate. So you would typically use that if you have a office and you suspect that the Russians or the Amerikanski are listening into your conversations and transmitted over to another building, and then you'll come in there with your field strength meter and you'll see whether there's any RF activity. Although with all our LED lights these days, I think it's going to be very difficult to see whether it's actually a listening device or an LED that's causing the RF interference. Okay, they are also generally not very sensitive, requiring strong fields to produce a reading. Yeah. So yeah, that is the field strength meter. I have once watched a program where the Russians built a listening device that they put into a award or something that was hanging on the wall that would have no batteries, but it will be powered by this incoming signal. So they produce a signal which penetrates the building, excite this transmitter, and then transmit the audio back to them in the building next door or across the road. I don't know, but it was quite a distance. But
It was
that
in the White House. It was in the White House. It was in like a wooden medallion or something like that they hanged up.
that's right, absolutely
I read that. And it went for a couple years undetected actually.
correct.
And they listened into the
Unbelievable.
Oval Office.
Yeah, unbelievable. Right, then we look at the absorption wave meter. The absorption wave meter is essentially a frequency selective field strength meter. So in other words, it's more accurate. You can actually see what type of frequency um, that, you know, get close to the frequency. What it works on the same principle, but it's got a tuning circuit that you can have the approximate frequency selected, but they in today's terms they are also not very accurate. They are vague, and I guess it was probably the follow up from the field strength meter major breakthrough. You can now adjust it. Um, but for instance, like they explain here, if you're operating a transmitter in the 80-meter band, but you detect energy in the region of the 7 megahertz band, it's a good indication that your transmitter is radiating harmonics. Now, um, we've had that problem with the previous competition, and we didn't have at the time a bandpass filter, and we applied the bandpass filter with a second competition, and we didn't have any problems with two radios working or operating in close vicinity of each other, interfering on two different bands. So yeah, you're gonna, harmonics is a evil thing. It's always there and difficult to get rid of. Okay, then we go to the two-tone signal generator. Now, the two-tone signal generator generates two tones of a signal. So that says in the name, and they also say that it's harmonically related. So in other words, it will be a multiple of one of the fundamental frequencies. So they apply this to the microphone input of an SSB transmitter to test the linearity of and to determine the peak envelope power if a peak reading watt meter is not available. Now, we did do that two different meters. So you'll use that signal, you'll feed that two-tone signal into the mic if you don't have a peak detection or peak reading watt meter in order to get the maximum output of your transmitter. The output of the transmitter would be connected to a dummy load, and an oscilloscope will be used to monitor the waveform across the dummy load. The following graph shows the output of the SSB. Okay, that shows this. Now, because the two frequencies are not the same, your two tones, in certain spots they will amplify each other, and in certain spots they will cancel each other out, and that will repeat itself forever. So that's why there's this effect. Now you can do the same thing just by feeding two audio frequencies through a normal amplifier, and at certain points they're gonna actually cancel each other out. So a lot of this is the same as audio. Flat topping is when it's clipping, it's just top of the signals cut off. And obviously, if you get that, it's undesirable. So you must reduce the signal strength or your input, your audio input, in order to reduce the output of the amplifier so that it doesn't distort. A more accurate way to measure it is with a spectrum analyzer, but a person's got to be careful because you can't just plug a 100-watt device into any spectrum analyzer. You need it to go through a dummy load. Some of the spectrum analyzers do have built-in dummy loads, but not all. So you will have to know how your spectrum analyzer works. Let me just go to the next page of my trip notes so I can see what. Okay, I did say about the spectrum analyzer, a two-tone generator test signal, and an oscilloscope can be used to measure the peak envelope power of an SSB transmission. And if the peak reading, that I also said. And then we go, just one thing here, that if you have a peak of 400, your average power output reading would be 200 watts. So, I mean, it's just something you got to know is that when it's 400, your average is half of that. Peak envelope power average is half of that. Then we go to the summary. Amp meter measures current. It's connected in series with a test circuit, and it must have a very low internal resistance because otherwise it's going to influence your reading. If you want to measure more current that it's designed for, you will have to use a shunt resistor in parallel with the amp meter. Otherwise, you're going to overdrive the amp meter. A voltmeter reads voltage. It is connected in parallel with a circuit, and it must ideally have a very high input resistance. A voltmeter can be scaled to read a higher voltages than its design capacity with a series resistor. Now, when we used to work on the CRT TVs, they had the line output transformer that used to give a very high voltage, and you had a special measuring tool that reduces the voltage to the point where you can actually measure it with a multimeter. But if there's a malfunction in that um, reducer, then it kills the multimeter. So people didn't like to use it. Multimeters can measure voltage, current, and resistance, and then possibly other quantities too. Now, most of the multimeters you get today can measure the beta of a transistor. Some of them can do capacitance and inductance and so on. Inductance is handy. Capacitance, we've got a saying, if you doubt the cap, replace the cap. The cap is a lot cheaper than what the cap tester is. So you're going to replace a lot of caps before you justify the capacitor tester. And what I use my capacitor tester for is purely to confirm, when you take a capacitor out and it gives you a reading that's off, now I found the fault. I mean, you take the capacitor out with the idea of replacing it anyway, but just that confirmation to say, right, I found the fault, the circuit's working again. That's what I use the capacitor tester for. Frequency counters count pulses in a circuit and display it in a frequency and hertz. It uses an accurate time base. Now, most of them use crystal controlled oscillators, but if you have lab conditions, you would use what they call a GPS disciplined time base. In other words, you get a GPS that gives you, I think it's a 10K pulse out, and you calibrate your frequency counter according to that 10K pulse that you get in, because the GPS time is extremely accurate. So, and that you would typically use if you do radio repairs professionally, and you have to, without a doubt, know that you have set this guy's radio 100% on frequency, and anybody anywhere in the world can connect it to his frequency counter that is GPS disciplined, and it will give exactly the same reading. Power and SWR meters are installed in the feed line between the transmitter and the antenna. And the guys that were there with the competition, they will know exactly where the SWR meter goes in, how it works, and how to connect it. But for those who haven't been there, don't worry, we'll show you. And then there's going to be the next competition or the next meeting at the park, call it the park at Vernon's Place. Then we'll play some more. I would really encourage people to come over, especially I think you can ask the other guys. I think they learn a lot in doing things that, and we have a lot of discussions and talk about things. So I think it's well worth going. Okay, the oscilloscope display rapidly changing signals. We do know it's very fast, and that's why we use it. Too quickly for mechanical meters. They normally display it over a time-based graph. That's all we said just now. And it has time on the horizontal scale and voltage on the vertical scale. And the scale is obviously adjustable on both ends. You can change the time base and you can change the voltage. Marker generators emit signals rich in harmonics to allow calibration of a receiver. Okay, maybe it must be a receiver. Or maybe you receive the harmonics and you calibrate according to that. With frequency counters now freely available, they are fading into oblivion. Okay. Which is, I guess, a good thing. A dip meter is an oscillator with an exposed coil that can be used to determine resonance in a tuned circuit. Like I explained just now, if you move the exposed coil close to the tuned circuit, the gauge will dip and you will know that you're on the resonant frequency. A field strength meter can measure RF field strength. It's normally not very sensitive or selective, and absorption wave meter is more sensitive and selective because obviously you can change the frequency as they said. Accurate field strength measurements can be made under laboratory conditions using a calibrated antenna and calibrated measuring receiver. Yeah, we'll rather use a spectrum analyzer, I guess, today instead of that. A two-tone signal generator is used to inject a known signal into an SSB transmitter so that its output power can be measured. The peak envelope power is twice the indicated output power from the transmitter. Right, let's see if we can do the questions. Okay, to extend the current range of a meter movement, a factor which must be known beforehand is the
B. 1B. Current carrying capabilities, isn't it?
It's close, but
Insulation resistance.
the full scale deflection voltage and the coil internal resistance.
Internal resistance. So it's
Yeah,
1A.
so that's right. So you need to know what the maximum is that it's when it's going to display the maximum voltage so that you can calibrate it with a
Which is determined by the internal resistance.
That's right, yes. To use a movement of a 0 to 50 microamp meter to measure a voltage in the range 0 to 10 kilovolt, the scale has been calibrated to read 0 to 100 use would be made of a, right, there's an ammeter. They want to measure voltage. So the resistor is going to be in series with series resistor. So it will not be a shunt resistor. So it's A or B. They did give us the formula to do this. Let's just see it. Let me just page back. Then we have to calculate it so that we know exactly. Right, R equals V divided by I. Now here's a calculator. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just going to do it on a small calculator. Let me just see if I can get to more or less the right answer. So we want to measure 10,000. 10,000 divided by 0.00. Am I right now? 5. Is that right? So that would be okay. That is, let me do it another way. Sorry, I just want to do the math so that we can get it right. 10 times 1 to the so it's 1 to the 3
200 mega ohm. A.
Also iemand is slim. 200 mega ohm.
That's
Okay.
10,000. 10,000 on the 50 times the 10 to the minus 6 because it's a microamp.
Yeah, divided by 50 to the minus
10 to 6 because it's micro.
6. That is correct. That is 200 with 6 zeros behind it, so that would be 2
Mega.
megs. That's right. So that would be A.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for using a transistorized multimeter is greater sensitivity. On a voltage scales, this means that
You're going to pay a lot of money.
I say it is B. The circuit under test sees a much higher input impedance. Like I said, you don't want your meter to influence your reading. Otherwise, you get a false reading and then you take the wrong decisions. Everybody agree with me? It sounds like it. Okay, this one is a catch question. This the basic instrument for measuring. Now, I want to emphasize basic because that gives you a clue. Instrument for measuring voltage and current is
Moving coil.
that's
it's
correct.
Just either you're going to go parallel or series, you said.
Correct, yes. You are correct. Right, let's go to the next page. What is a multimeter? Okay, that would be A because it's not an SWR power meter.
You said AVO, ampere, voltage, and ohms.
Ohms, that's correct, yeah. So that's
So it's
A.
volts, current, and resistance.
Correct, yes. Although, yeah, C lacks volts and D has no voltage either. So it's definitely
A.
A. I agree. How is a voltmeter typically connected to a circuit? Voltmeter is connected in parallel because you put the terminals on the positive and the negative of the battery to measure the battery.
Hmm.
Right. The range of an ammeter can be extended by adding resistance. Sorry, that's my mouse that's on drugs. It scrolls by itself. The range of an ammeter can be extended by adding resistance in parallel.
With the meter.
Sorry, sê net weer.
With the meter. Because are you adding it with the circuit or the meter?
You're right. To the meter. You add it to the meter and not the circuit. That's correct. So that would be D. Sorry,
D.
Yeah. Then they ask us, what is a dummy load? No, it's not an image of an antenna. No, not a antenna used for reference for gain measure. No.
B, isn't it? A non-radiating load.
It's a non-radiating load for a transmitter. Correct. What material may a dummy load suitable
Yeah, the
for
non-inductive.
RF?
Yeah,
That's
you
right.
emphasized non-inductive.
That's it. Absolutely. You know why? Because I made that mistake. I built myself a very nice dummy load from wire wound resistors, and I thought I was
You
very
got
clever.
feedback.
When I put it on the SWR meter, it was worse than the antenna I had.
Oh.
Now, what station accessory is used in place of an antenna during transmitter tests when no signal radiation is desired?
Dummy
A
Yeah,
dummy
load.
that's just
load.
opposite the question. That's the opposite of the question.
Yeah.
Just swapped around, turn around.
What is the purpose of a dummy load? Okay, reduce power output for QRP? No. To give comparative
Oh,
signal reports? Definitely not.
off
That's
the
right.
air transmitter testing.
Off the air transmitter testing and adjustment. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then they ask us, what is a marker generator?
Turkey pen?
I say it's A high stability they call oscillator that generates a signal or series of signals. That's the key. A series of signals for a single low frequency signal source. It doesn't sweep. Nothing to do with aircraft. Separation. Reception, no, definitely not. Low stability oscillate used for this. No. So the only one it can be is A. High stability, they didn't actually call it high stability in the book. They called it not very accurate. But yeah, it's
Isn't
definitely
that
a
the
big.
one that's doing the harmonics?
That's right. Yeah. The key was here series of signals.
Series of signals is the
That
harmonics.
is the harmonics. That's correct. Yes, sir. And then that's where I
And
said
150, 300, 450, 600.
that's right. Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
Right. Then a dip oscillator is a type of RF signals generator. It's not a cathode ray oscilloscope, so B is definitely out. It's not an SWR of a reflectometer. It's not a watt meter. So the only thing it can be is a RF signal generator.
Hmm.
Yeah, because it generates a signal and you take it to a tuned circuit, and when the two circuits are tuned, the signal the needle dips. What piece of test equipment contains horizontal and vertical channel amplifiers? We know it's an oscilloscope.
Oscilloscope, because the horizontal is the time and the vertical is the volts.
Correct, yes. I must add there that you can actually switch the time base off and also feed an external source in
External
For
triggers.
time.
as a time
Ex-
base, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is can be voltage related. So in other words, you can have the dot standing in the middle of the screen and then pull it from side to side and up and down or in any direction that you wish. But
Isn't
in
that also how
most,
the old ones is done with external time?
what's that?
The very, very old oscilloscopes are synced with that. Like then it was done, I think, like how they do atomic clocks that's linked up with things like this. That if
Look,
you are getting
you
very deep into it.
you get something what they call a trigger on the oscilloscope time base. So in other words, the moment you would typically use your clock signal on a CPU as a trigger so that you can see the data move. So in other words, the moment it triggers, then you can so that your time base is in tune with your data, so that you can actually understand the data that you see. But in most cases, your X is the time base and your Y is the signal, although you can switch the time base off and also put a voltage in to control the X axis, should you wish. But in most cases, I have never had the need for that. Um, we always use the time base that's in the oscilloscope, or I've never needed anything else.
The next one sounds like B.
The best instrument for checking transmitted signal quality from an SS is that double tone, side tone. What's it? What's that thing called? Let me just see now that side tone. Is it side tone or is it dual tone? Dip meter. Two-tone. You see that signal generator. So it's not a two-tone. Side tone monitor. Yes, that's dangerous, eh? Can very easily confuse a person.
I wouldn't say it can't be B because signal strength does not always mean that's not necessarily just all what you're looking for. How loud you're broadcasting.
Well,
But yeah.
they did test it just now with the oscilloscope and a dummy load. They feed
So
the
it could be
signal.
a oscilloscope.
They use the oscilloscope. Yeah. Field strength meter is not accurate enough to see. You can't see the signal quality on it. You can only see that there's a signal present. You don't know what the frequency is. You don't know what it looks
Mm.
like. You just know that it's there. But the oscilloscope, you can actually
Will
see
give
the
better.
quality because you can see the peaks. Same picture, a sine wave, and if the tops are rounded nicely, then it's a good signal. If it's chopped at the top and the bottom, it means that there's distortion.
Mm.
Okay, so we'll use the oscilloscope to check that.
Amount of things you can do with a oscilloscope is just it's crazy.
It's an amazing piece of equipment. You know what? It's better than butter on bread.
It's basically for me the multimeter on steroids to give you even more than what just the basic thing is
Absolutely.
you measure.
When connecting a CRT, that means a cathode ray tube oscilloscope. That's the old type. To view the wave envelope pattern of an amplitude modulated transmitter, the following coupling method would be used. I don't
You
want to be
said those things. Yeah, you said those things can't take high voltages, isn't it?
so
Induction would be the safest.
inductive coupling would be the safest. Yeah.
But look at D-then as well.
But to what?
To the
Yeah,
final
is it-
circuit. To the final circuit, because what's the point if you
you're
don't
measuring. Yeah.
measuring just something? You need to be measuring what your end result is, and then obviously that will give your if furthermore final adjustment is needed. But the
So
yeah.
I cannot remember that I actually read that in the book. That
No,
would be
but
under
you would use
oscilloscope.
oscilloscope. You would use the oscilloscope to get to a tuned circuit. So actually, you don't want the specification. If you do
Yeah,
it to a final tuned circuit, it means your thing is already tuned. So why do you need a test equipment if it's already tuned?
yeah. So look,
Contradicting that question.
the correct answer for according to the book is inductive coupling. So
Yeah.
that is the
Because
correct answer.
yeah.
But I will go and look and see whether, because I can't remember actually reading that
Mm,
in the text. So I'll just go and double check. If I find it to be otherwise, I will send it out on the group. But I believe that that is the correct answer. Yes. Vertical deflection plates in a CRT oscilloscope may be used to measure the amplitude of a signal. The signal may be displayed
Voltage.
in terms of voltage B. That is
Yeah.
correct.
mm.
What kind of input signal is used to test peak envelope power? That's the dual two audio frequency sine signals.
Signals. So it's two-tone.
That's right. That's a two-tone signal that is multiple of the fundamental. What can be determined by making a two-tone test using an oscilloscope? The amplified PP power output. Is ek reg? Yes, indeed. What is a reflectometer used for?
You said to measure light.
Nie heeltemal nie. Ja,
Standing
that's a
wave ratio.
Standing wave ratio, yeah. Yeah, person must just, like remember that we all SWR always, and we must know that it's the standing wave ratio, and that is the reflected signal, the power that's sent out and the reflected signal together gets used to calculate the standing wave ratio. And you want as little as possible reflected power back to the radio. And SWR over, I think they say 3 is unusable. Okay, and then digital systems is Johan's. So we are done. I didn't even realize we went an half an hour over, but at least we could answer all the questions, so that's good.
Is the digital communication also on for Thursday then? Or is he going to do both in one shot?
That's right. Let's quickly go and look there. I did update all of them. So
I think we can stop the recording.
Yep, let's do that. The poor souls that have to watch it. Stop.